Upper Main Street in Lewiston, be up the hill from the fire station, near the cemetery, is where the school was. And then they built a church on Mountain Avenue in 1820, so they had their first church, and then they moved this church to the corner of Main and Chapel Streets, right across from the old Peck's department store building. That's why it's called Chapel Street. So there was this church on the corner. In 1838, they moved there. And then they built a church on the corner of Bates and Main Street. So they were all up and down Main Street. And this is the corner of Bates and Main Street, which is where the current United Baptist Church is, which is now vacant. Okay, then Auburn members seceded from this church and began meeting on April 3rd, 1859 in Auburn and organized themselves as a church at a meeting in Auburn Hall, just across the street. I'm not sure it was the same building, but it was the same location. And then they built a chapel on Court Street and changed their name to the Court Street Free Will Baptist Society. And in 1878, they built a bigger church. Can you see? They built a bigger church. Here's the Auburn Public Library in this newspaper clipping. This isn't until 19-something, 1903 or whatever. And so they built this impressive church on Court Street. And the pastor, begin with, I'm sorry, first the interior, shot of the interior of the church. And then Ebenezer Fernald was kind of the most prominent of the pastors at the time, but his tenure was cut short as pastor because he was on a train which was boarded, a Central Maine Railroad train, which was boarded by some, as the newspaper called, drunken roughs. And he went to the defense of some women that they were harassing, and he suffered considerable injuries, and he then sued, and the Maine Central Railroad had to pay expenses, his medical expenses and court expenses, and they were held liable, in other words, for not maintaining order. It was a Supreme Court, Maine Supreme Court decision, so it was something that limited what the trains would have to be more responsible in protecting their passengers. Well, so we have these two secessionist church groups coming to Auburn from the Lewiston churches. Yes, ma'am.
That's what I was just going to ask. So, just to make sure my train of thought's right, we started in, these two churches started in Lewiston across from what would be the Peck building, broke off, well, it was across the street, so the corner of Lisbon.
One set broke off from
and came to Auburn, and then they broke off again.
No, there were two separate churches. There was the so-called First Baptist Church on the corner of Lisbon and Maine.
Right.
Which was more Calvinist
right.
more in orientation. And then there were the Free Will Baptists, which went all up and down Main Street, but ended up on Bates and Maine.
Right.
And so almost simultaneously, they each the Auburn people seceded
Oh,
from
okay,
the
so now there's
two
gonna be two
churches.
in Auburn.
Yeah, so
One on
they
Spring
seceded
and
from the
one on
two churches, so that there was the current, the church that still exists currently, am I pointing in the right
Yes,
direction?
you are.
Right next door, and then the Free Will Baptist Church, which has been torn down.
Right, gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
There, good. Yeah, glad you got that straight for us. Okay, so there are two secessionist movements, and then, as we shall see, the Methodists also at the same time. Well, you could say secession was in the air. Of course, the Southerners were threatening to secede at the same time, leading up to the Civil War.
Right.
So you could say, well, everyone's seceding, everyone's getting independent. But there is more to it, I think, than that. One I call the tenor of the times and the nature of these churches. These churches are both evangelical churches. They were concerned with spreading the gospel. And those Auburn people do need the gospel. And so it wasn't only that they wanted to secede, but they had this felt need to carry the gospel to their Auburn brethren. And Auburn was growing, as was Lewiston. Both cities were growing at this time. At this same time, the mills were being constructed, 1860, thereabouts. And so the population was growing very rapidly in these communities. And so the gospel needed to be spread. And then there were other political reasons. Auburn Village had just been unified via a secession, if you will, or an absorption of Danville north of the Little Androscoggin River. Auburn and Danville occupied what is now downtown Auburn simultaneously. Well, not simultaneously, but they split it. And so with the unification of the Auburn side, greater consciousness, self-consciousness occurred. Another reason might have been that they had just gone through a big fight over the location of the county seat. Androscoggin County had just been formed in 1854 and had a big battle about should it be in Lewiston, should it be in Auburn.
Should it be in Danville?
Auburn won, but or Danville was also there, but they only
Danville
got a
was
couple
the
votes.
third. Danville was the third one that was under
They were third.
consideration.
They were third. Right. Betty wants to be sure that we have to include Danville. That the legislature provided all three towns as being eligible, but Danville decided to throw in their lot with Auburn, and that probably made all the difference. Okay, be accurate on this. Anyway, there was this rivalry, and already there had been a joint fire district. It's in the news this week, isn't it? Now it's the police and the
Now
fire.
it's police and
But
fire.
anyway, there had been a joint fire district serving both Auburn and Lewiston, but just 2 years after the decision on the county seat, they split and had their own separate fire departments on the respective sides of the city. So there's that kind of feeling, I think, that could have contributed to it. And then there's another local kind of factor, which